Okay, welcome to Peace Conversations from Peace Community of Faith, a progressive and multi-generational congregation connected with the United Methodist Church. I hope you can watch this all the way through and that you will find it helpful. So we are talking about faith as our topic this morning, and we're just going to jump right into the conversation. Anybody have anything they want to share?
I love this chapter. It explained to me how I was brought up to believe, how that did not fit with my way of thinking at all, and how I struggled to find what believing in God, well, and it's not believing, living out a Christian life means. And so I'm much happier today and have great comfort in the way I currently think and hopefully act.
Sure.
And behave.
Yeah. Chuck or Lisa, you have any kind of general comment like Sharon may have had?
There's just different thoughts throughout. I do like it when he makes a point that that the faith you believe, it's not about the creeds and the memorization and all that stuff, but that it's one path. The way isn't owned by anybody, and when Jesus said, through me, he's talking about the way, and as many people have brought that over history and different times, and many people in the world follow different paths. One doesn't necessarily better than the other. One doesn't trump another, and so that's a good point to be made. Sometimes I kind of think he gets tangled in words, just trying to define everything, to the utmost. I suppose in his line of work, that's it's what he's got to do. But sometimes saying things like, there's one point in there, I think, when there's conflict between what you know and what you believe, that's when you follow the faith, or something like that. And I just kind of said, well, I think when you don't know, you may fall to faith, but if you know something, there shouldn't be a conflict between what you know and you believe, because if you know something, you know it, and why are you believing something different than what you know? Where's the fallen to faith come from here? So I think if you know something to be true, and I know that the sun's the center of the solar system, and that it swings around on an outer arm of the Milky Way. For me to believe that the Earth is the center and have faith on that, it makes no sense. I mean, what I know and what I believe, when I know something, it makes no sense to believe something other than when you know it. If you don't know, and there are many things that we don't know, and will not find out because they're not in that realm, as far as scientifically, but there's places for faith to fall, and sometimes from your experience or from other things that bring you closer to that, so that you understand there's a lot more, that your faith can fall on what that might be, how you might use it, where it fits in. But when there's conflict between what you know and what you believe, that almost by itself makes no sense. I don't know what you think on that, but.
And Chuck, that's where I struggled growing up, because everybody else thought that the creeds and belief were how you got to heaven.
Right.
So it was difficult, well, it was impossible for me to think otherwise and be comfortable with that, because there was nobody who supported questioning that.
Right. No, it was intense. I mean, they drilled that in pretty hard when I was young too. And when I first stepped away from it, you're looking to see what's going to fall, Just because it's been drilled in, even though you're logically, you know better.
It wasn't the norm, so it was uncomfortable.
It was, well, it's been what you lived with since the day you were born. And yeah, it's pretty intense. The one thing he doesn't get into when he talks about the creeds and saying, he tries to explain away a few items of the creeds with generalizations and definitions, but he doesn't get into the crazy points of the creed either.
No.
He only points to a couple things like the existence of, and he says of God, but what do you define God as? I mean, when you look at that, people think of a person, and all think, they create God in their image, and they put a person up in space someplace, and all that's kind of goofy. So when you think of God, it does seem to be careful not to reference God as a person, but at the same time, never really gets into that. So he says, you believe in God. Well, that's pretty wide gamut, for what that can mean to you. And so I can say, sure. Do I believe in God like most of the people that I know that call themselves Christians and wave that flag? Absolutely not. But do I believe in a central power of this that runs through everything?
Mhm.
There is something that connects everything, and it's very powerful, and we're part of it. And I believe that. And try to touch that, define it. Certainly, I don't see it as a person that's standing up there with manipulating all of our lives. And I mean, it's a power like anything other than in the world that we use and that we can rely on. But it is also not some person up there that's vengeful and looking for handouts and things like that. So, but he never really defines that. He kind of defends the fact that, the Christian faith and how he can define it, but he skipped over all of the parts with the crazy parts on the creeds and didn't define how you deal with that.
Yeah, we are going to have a session where we talk about God, and it'll be interesting if you're reading the book to see how he goes on to clarify that.
Yeah.
So that'll be curious, and so we can stay tuned for that.
Yeah. And I think I've heard some of his before, and so I don't think we're too far off on that. It's just that he skipped over a lot of stuff with the creeds, and there's a lot of stuff in the creed that the church has put in that has nothing whatsoever to do with anything Jesus ever taught, and that they put as part of the church, and that's why I say I may be a follower of teachings of Jesus, but not necessarily the church with the creeds and all that stuff, because they've added on a lot of baggage. And
yeah, well, I'm just going to pause here. I gotta welcome May. This is our cat who will visit us during the sessions. May is Chinese for friend. Sometimes you only see her tail, and I like to talk about that being the shark tail that goes across the screen.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, you are more than welcome to pass, but I wonder if there are a couple thoughts that you wanted to share.
I like his kind of introduction in breaking down faith as in different ways. One of being in the head, faith of the head, and then faith of the heart. And then the faith of the heart was then broken down into 3 different descriptions or types or whatever. So so I like that, the 4 different meanings of faith and ways of viewing faith.
And he liked to use Latin words to describe those.
Yes, he does.
The first one was assensus, which is assent in English, and then fiducia, which is like fiduciary, kind of. And he goes on to describe that a little bit more in depth as trust. Ring a bell?
Yes.
Fidelitas, which is fidelity.
Yep.
Another way of talking about faith. And then a visio, which is vision, which is not so much how we see physically, but that overall, as he said, paradigm, the way we put everything together or visualize everything,
Mhm.
and how it flows or comes together as one. So those were the three kind of words he used to describe. Sharon?
Yes, I have a question about something he's saying on page 30.
Okay.
He's talking a census. And he said, Christian Europe in the Middle Ages, most people took the truth of Christianity and the Bible for granted. It was the conventional wisdom of the time. There was no conflict between Christianity and science. In that setting, faith as a census was effortless, and the emphasis was thus on the other meanings of faith, which we will soon consider.
Yeah.
So what I thought he was saying was that Christians in the Middle Ages followed what we are currently looking, the way we currently believe or think or behave. Yes. And then we lost, or the church lost that. So in the beginning, it was good.
Well, in the 1500s, it was different. He makes, and I think most people talk about the different eras that we go throughout history. There's a significant turning point at the Enlightenment.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm,
And I think before we talk about the Enlightenment and the development of science, for religion and for faith, I like to talk about a naive, literal perspective. You know, as Chuck said earlier, vast majority of the people believed that the earth was the center of the universe,
right.
okay, before science.
Mhm,
They weren't right in a scientific perspective, right?
mhm,
But it was pre-science. And so they could look at the creation stories in a naive, literal way.
mhm,
But with the development of the Enlightenment and science, as Chuck reminded us, you know, the Earth rotates around the sun, and our solar system is at the very edge of the Milky Way, you know, our
mhm,
galaxy. We know that because of science.
mhm.
And now we can talk about what at least like a literal I misspoke there real quick. It is an intentional literalism. As Chuck was saying, we have been shown our place in the universe.
Mhm,
And if you want to continue to believe what the Bible says literally, you have to accept it intentionally,
mhm,
even though it's shown to be wrong.
mhm,
Okay, so, you know, back before our modern scientific understanding, it makes sense for those folks just to understand and accept what the religious authorities were saying, because that was dominant. And when we move into a time where scientific understanding is important, for many of us, no matter what faith tradition we follow, it's called us to reevaluate
mhm,
our faith.
mhm.
So that's a long explanation, maybe for what you were talking about, but there is a difference, I think, between a naive, literal understanding of the faith which is the dominant cultural understanding before the Enlightenment. And today, it is almost, you have to be intentional to disregard what the world lets us know. And I think in many ways that can be dangerous. Now, I'm going to throw in one more thing, and then so as I'm throwing out this other thing, you all can let yourselves wind up for your conversations and what you want to share.
Mhm.
When you look at faith as a developmental process from when you're born and learning what's trustworthy and what's not trustworthy, will somebody change my diaper when I need my diaper changed? Will somebody make sure I have food when I need food, and I can then engage in a trusting relationship with that person? There's a sense that our faith develops throughout our lives. And for those of us that grew up in the church as kids, going to Sunday school,
Mhm.
we had Sunday school teachers that taught us what to believe. And as kids, that is often accepted uncritically,
Right.
right? And so part of maturing is evaluating and evolving with a sense of a deeper and broader trust from what at one point in our lives we gave assent to, but no longer can. See how I niftily worked those two definitions of faith in there?
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to evaluate what you assent to.
Mhm.
So that's all I have to say about that for now.
Okay.
So what other thoughts may people have here?
Let's see. Yeah, I'll say this one more time. I like this, what he says on the bottom of 34 and the top of 35, and then I'll do my best to stop saying it. He says, this believing the right way, believing the right things, this is the threat of the earlier paradigm. God will judge us and punish those who didn't get it right. But if we do get it right, then perhaps the consuming fire that will otherwise devour everybody and everything will spare us. Yeah, and that was my huge fear, is that I wouldn't get it right. And I can remember a minister saying, you might be sincere about your belief, but you could be sincerely wrong. And I can't tell you the fear that I lived in for possibly getting it sincerely wrong. So yeah, I'll stop saying that now.
Boy, Sharon, I just feel like you must have been in some of the same sessions I was growing up.
You know, Chuck, it's so comforting to hear that you went through the same thing.
Oh gosh,
Um,
wasn't very
I just
comfortable at the
really
time.
struggled.
Well,
It wasn't very comfortable at the time, but it's good I can look back and laugh, because
Yeah.
it wasn't always so.
Yeah,
well,
that just is really comforting to me.
and I think there are many people who had the same experience as you two.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I remember a couple times the pastor I had growing up telling my friends if they didn't, his word was shape up, right?
Oh,
Which is behave and believe what I'm telling you to believe, they would go to hell.
Oh,
you know?
Oh yeah, no, I
Yeah.
got that all the time. You know, it's interesting sometimes when I listen to some great comic talents that are almost off the charts, out of the I think a reaction to a lot of this. There's two of them in particular that grew up in very similar situation as mine, and took the reaction very different. One of them is Robin Williams. He grew up. He's my age. Was my age. Grew up in the same basic city, Detroit area, and came through a lot of that system that I did. And the other one is George Carlin. And well, both of those two, and they a lot of their humor and everything. I just feel like is a survival reaction to all of the insanity that was imposed.
Yeah.
I mean, we laugh at it and it's great, and sometimes it brings a lot of chuckles and everything, but it does help us laugh at ourselves and at the craziness of the world. I think that's also a medicine to help find through, because Borg does a good job of trying to break things down and trying to find a way through this, so that the reality of spirit and the reality of the way we need to grow, you can wrap your hands around it a little bit. So he does a good job of that. I mean, sometimes I look at things that I keep waiting for the explanation on, like the other what do you call it, the creeds, the other parts of that, and maybe he gets into it later, but no, it's not his main focus. But it's just one of those things that, because of the system I grew up in, I keep waiting. Okay, explain this one. I want. How do you apply this to that craziness? Because applying it to believing in God, whatever, like say, whatever form or what you ascribe to that, I can, that's a pretty easy one.
Yeah.
Some of the other stuff that gets very specific, it doesn't. But he does break down ways to look at stuff, ways to look at faith and everything, and different parts or different aspects. It's very good.
Yeah.
and we have to remember the creeds were written a long time ago for very different people.
Yeah. Well, the thing is it's not that long ago, because they're they were well after Jesus' time. Yeah. And they were nothing to do with what Jesus was teaching.
So talking about the creeds, he goes back once again to that Latin word,
Right.
which is credo.
Yep.
Does anybody remember what he said, that in Latin, what does credo mean?
Oh, it's right at the beginning there.
Okay. Does anybody remember that as they were reading?
Oh, I certainly remember reading it, and
Yeah.
I don't have it right on my head right now. I can hardly remember my name without looking at my idea in the morning.
Yeah.
And I don't remember either, but it seems to me that his point was that, and I agree, it gives us kind of a basis to start with, so we have some idea of what we're dealing with when we're thinking about God and Christ. But I do like what he says, and I'll bring it up later, is think about all this deeply but loosely. And I think about the creeds or credo that way too.
Okay.
Yeah.
It says the pre-modern meaning of the English words believe and believing and the Latin word credo are very different from what believing has come to mean in our time.
What page are you on, Lisa?
39.
Okay.
Okay. And for those that may be listening to the recording, what we're using for the foundation of our discussion is a book written by a guy named Marcus Borg called The Heart of Christianity. And if you flip over to page 40, the basic meaning for credo was, I give my heart to.
Right.
So I think our understanding of creed today, which fits into the old tradition, or what we may call yet even today, I think the dominant tradition of Christianity is you have to give your assent to what the creed says, right? Or you're going to go to hell, right? That's much more of how many people have been taught the creeds.
Right.
And that's the word he uses is affirm. What can we affirm?
Right.
And my guess, and you know, I read the book a couple times, a couple years ago. I don't think he's going to come back to creed very much, because he's not real excited about the creeds either, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I don't.
But
don't
but
think
I
so.
do think he likes that. What can we give our hearts to? I mean,
Right.
that's the heart of Christianity.
And in a lot of our discussions and say a Tuesday night or Saturday morning, going back to original meanings is
Yep.
very important. Look at the etymology of the words.
Yep.
And giving your heart to something and giving assent and strict belief in are very different things.
No.
Putting your heart behind
Yeah.
something, you know, like the teachings of Jesus or whatever, it has more to do with his teachings and following that, where it's not about believing anything strictly, because a lot of that's exploration, and we all have to find it in whatever way we find it, and we're all going to perceive things differently.
I would think if we could ask Marcus Borg what he thought about creeds, maybe the summary sentence he would use, one of his favorite words: creeds are metaphoric. They're metaphors, and they are not meant to be taken literal.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
What other exciting things are spinning around in your head?
Just to kind of wrap up what we've been talking about, I love the sentence on page 39. I draw the generalization that we cannot easily give our heart to something that our mind rejects. Yeah.
It's not an either or, it's a both and. Yeah.
And then on page 40, he says, short paragraph, most simply, to believe meant to love.
Okay.
Indeed, the English words believe and beloved are related. What we believe is what we beloved. Faith is about beloving God.
Okay.
Like that too.
Yeah.
And I think I may add to that, developing a sense of what is trustworthy to love and not love in our own lives. It's not only about God.
Yeah.
And then the basic, I think his basic premise is that God is love. And it has to be a love that nurtures our lives. Because I don't remember what you said earlier, Sharon, but what that pastor told you about you can be emphatically wrong, right? That does not nurture people's lives.
Right.
For there is a way where what is right is what nurtures life.
Yes, and because of those incorrect beliefs, I did not love or nurture myself. So I really felt hollow inside, and I am learning to nurture myself also, or first, because that's, I believe, what God wants me to do. And then I can feel nurturing towards others. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and they pull that from a story that Jesus shared about loving God and loving your neighbor and loving yourself. Borg doesn't in the book talk much about loving yourself, but I think the three are very integral together.
Mhm.
You can only love your neighbor and God as much as you love yourself in a compassionate way that allows us to see love that moves out into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think until you find that spot where you can love yourself, you will find the truth that your neighbor, and God are all one.
Mhm.
There's a oneness that connects all, and until you see that reflection in your neighbor,
Mhm.
if you can't do it, if you can't see it in yourself, if you can't find your, and love yourself,
Yeah.
to be able to look at your neighbor and see that spark, that divinity, and everything, every set of eyes you're looking back in.
And
Yeah, and we did not learn loving ourselves growing up.
Mhm.
It was taking care of others or being kind to others, but had nothing to do with loving ourselves.
There was an
So,
assumption. There was an assumption when I grew up that you automatically did because of all of our kind of greed and selfishness, that we all loved ourselves, but that is not at all the same as loving yourself. Being self-centered and loving yourself are not the same thing. And they assumed that all kids and everything are self-centered, so you all love yourself. So that's why they all compared it to that. But I think it's a truth that you love your neighbor as yourself. It's not a command, it's a truth. If you're not loving your neighbor, you don't have a good loving image of yourself. And
yeah, and in my mind, it's if I don't love myself, I cannot love my neighbor.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I see it as a flow of energy or chi where it flows through everything. So if you've got a blockage in yourself,
Mhm.
then you're blocking the energy, right? That
Yep.
flows through everything. So I think
Yep.
that's why if those channels are open in yourself, then you're more likely to see it in all around us, in everything, and other people, and in our relationship with God, which is through everything, right?
And what I'm just thankful for is I am starting to feel it, to actually feel it, love for myself and love for my neighbor. Yeah.
I think for many people as they're growing up, and Sharon and Chuck, as you were saying, oftentimes our experience with religion is harmful.
Yeah.
And there needs to be, when we're harmed, a willingness to acknowledge we've been harmed and to heal from that. Because I think sometimes when we are harmed, we assume it's our fault. That somehow there's something wrong with me.
Yep.
And I think oftentimes, especially for children that are harmed from a religious perspective, sometimes, physically, sexually, there is this graciousness that we need to offer to ourselves,
Mhm.
right? Which is a form of love.
Mhm.
And in order to be gracious to ourselves, then it allows us to be compassionate, which is a love that reaches out to others.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so much of what can happen for many people from the time they're children through adulthood is religion is used to harm rather than to heal, or to allow us to love ourselves, one another, and God.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Page 41, I like this.
Okay, 41.
The Christian life is as simple and challenging as this: to love God and to love that which God loves.
Mhm,
And that includes me
mhm.
as well as you
Yeah,
folks.
yeah,
I like that. And that is meaningful to me.
yeah.
Simple and challenging.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And becomes at the same time simpler and more challenging the more you try to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
And
Well-
you said something earlier too, Gary. It's to learn to trust people. Trusting the right people,
Mhm,
those who like care about us and are supportive of us, and kind of turn our backs on those folks who aren't really
mhm.
caring about us.
Yeah. And one of the distinctions I would like to make is I am a both and rather than an either or person.
Mhm.
So, you know, basically faith is an ability to trust that leads us to love God, our neighbor, and ourselves.
Mhm.
That seems to be basic. Now, my grandmother, who grew up in the traditional um, expression of Christianity, uh, you know, she may be turning over in her grave hearing that, I don't think the creeds have as much value as they did when I grew up, that they're more metaphorical than literal. My grandma may be turning over in her grave hearing her grandson say that. But I trust my grandma with my life because I know she loves me.
Mm.
Okay. That's
Nice.
much different than the pastor who was an authoritative figure in my life that told me if I did not believe this as is taught in Luther's catechism, I'm going to go in hell. That is not very trustworthy or loving. Okay.
Right.
So there are people I know that still stand within that traditional understanding of the Christian faith, but they are willing to engage in a trusting relationship with me where we can love one another.
Mhm. Right.
That is different than a person who wonders if I should even be a Christian, let alone a pastor,
Mhm.
because I'm progressive.
Right.
So I do kind of want to clarify what's really valuable, I think, wherever people are at, it is trusting relationships that allow us to love one another. That's what faith is all about.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I do want to spend a little bit of time because he does return back to faith as a ascent, what we should ascend to that defines us as Christians rather than atheists, agnostics, or Buddhists, or Hindus, or Islam. Do you remember those three things he talked about that really help us clarify if we stand within the Christian tradition or not? Starts on page 37, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being Christian means affirming the reality of God.
Okay. And
Christian faith means affirming the utter centrality of Jesus.
mm-hmm.
And Christian faith means affirming the centrality of the Bible.
Okay. I would add to that, and he does in the next chapter, the Bible as central to our faith tradition. It is just not the Bible as the Bible as the Bible. it is in the context of a faith tradition.
Tradition, right?
Yeah,
So anyway, but those are the three things he thinks that are primary. And actually, those are going to be the next chapters he talks about, right?
Mhm.
But so what do you think of those three, and how may you clarify those if you think they need to be clarified?
Well, that was running through right now. You talking about that now or next week?
Well, right now,
General.
and we have about 8 minutes, so yeah. So go ahead, Chuck.
Well, when you talk about affirming the reality of God, like I say, there's a lot of different images of what that means, and I have an image in myself that has probably very, very low overlap with most other people who call themselves Christians. Maybe closer with what people who call themselves Buddhists might think, and others. But what I do believe is what Jesus was teaching, and I don't believe it is what the church has come out with about having an authoritative figure. Now, the Jewish historical Bible, the Old Testament, does talk about this authoritative person that's vengeful and all this other stuff. I think Jesus was trying to break from that.
Well,
And, go ahead.
no, I want us to be careful, because the Jesus that we know is also someone who stands in the tradition of the Hebrew Bible,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So
But the
you know,
interpretation he used was more
mhm,
for the spirit of people and not. I believe when I read what he said, when I read what he taught, what he got in trouble for, a lot of it had to do with finding the spirit behind that, and not um, a, a, a physical, vengeful person that was controlling and counting coup on everybody's lives.
well, and I'm just going to step in. I think the God of the Hebrew Bible is much broader than that.
No.
There is a way to understand the God of the Hebrew Bible like that, just as there is a way to understand the God of Christianity like that. I mean, frankly, the most violent book in the Hebrew or the Christian Bible is not found in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
It's found in the New Testament.
Right.
And that's Revelation. Right. So I hear what you're saying, and I think you also believe that God is much broader than that.
Right.
It is much more any tradition that depicts God as judgmental and harmful.
Right.
Whether it be Jewish or Christian or Hindu or Buddhist or whatever, is too narrow a definition of God.
Right.
Okay.
So I think when he talks about affirming the reality, I think what does a person mean by that? Because, like I say, I have an image that I can work with, and that is real for me. It is not the same that I hear discussed in other places. The next one
But
was
here he says Borg uses the term more for God.
Within traditional dominant Christianity right now, I think there is still an emphasis on God as a being somewhere, right? That can be loving, but also can be judging. I think more and more we're moving to a sense of God as that more. And I like in the Gospel of John where Jesus says, God is spirit, and you worship God in spirit and truth, which resonates real well.
right.
But more in his time was a word progressives love to use. And I think as progressives, the community of peace is kind of where you're at, Chuck.
Yeah.
Rather than maybe a more a church that is more literal in what it believes, right? But I just wanted to clarify stuff, and we'll cruise on here, okay? And excuse me for, interrupting.
Yeah, and as far as affirming the utter centrality of Jesus, now I think he kind of goes on there and kind of undoes a lot what that statement implies. But I do think that Jesus, the teaching for Christians, is a core thing. Does not mean that Jesus is the only path for that.
And that's what he says.
He says that later, but I said in that first statement, it's kind of implied the one and only. And later on, he goes and clarifies that, which I'm glad he does, because what Jesus taught, others have taught, and it's important to know that I think that the basically the same teachings in different words, different ways, just like Jesus used many parables to try to point to what he's talking about. There's many people who are doing the same thing, and we need to look at where they intersect to start to begin to find truth. So anyway, those are just a couple thoughts there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Bible, the third one, Christian faith means affirming the centrality of the Bible. It means a commitment to the Bible as a foundational document and identifying document. But I
Right.
look forward to
But-
reading more about that and having it be.
But certainly not the only, because there's a whole lot of writings out there that support what Jesus was teaching and where we should be going that aren't the Bible.
No.
And so it's one of, it's not, not the only, but if you're central to things, it's a good place to kind of go back, because that's where this particular group found its path.
And I think I agree with, it would have been nice if he would have put in there, these are central for the Christian faith.
Yeah.
But other faiths have other centralities that are just as valuable.
And that are equivalent. Yeah.
Yep. I definitely agree. I'm gonna wind this down here. I want to close this out in about a minute. Sharon, I want to give you a quick opportunity if there's anything you want to share.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. Lisa, anything else you want to share?
No, I think this was a good chapter.
Good. Chuck?
Me too.
Nope. I think I've said too much.
No, I don't. I think what you said is great. And we want to make sure everybody has time to share. But I think moving onward, this will give us a good foundation. Faith is the development of trusting relationships, no matter where they are, that nurture love. That's moving forward. And I think, Chuck, your reminder that there are other world faith traditions that are equal to the Christian tradition and have a place at the table. I am much closer to a Buddhist or a person of another faith tradition that has that same definition of love than I am to a Christian brother or sister who sees that I need to believe the correct thing that they believe in order to be Christian.
Right. Well, one of my founding kind of a statement that kind of expresses where I feel like my search is always stated that God made us in God's image.
Yeah.
And so many times what I found is that we have made God in our image.
Yeah.
And the goal is to find out what is that image that is inside of us. It's not the 5 fingers and toes and the 2 eyes in the front of the head. That's the image we're talking about. That is a physical manifestation. What are we in our core that is godlike or that spark from God, as opposed to trying to create God as a person. And I think that's becomes a worthy search to try to explore inside of ourselves and find out what that means.
Well,
Um,
and with that, I'm going to say thank you, Chuck. That is a good sense to end up on. I'm going to end our session together. I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and hopefully we'll see you next Saturday. And
Okay.
anybody else that may want to join constructively in the conversation. But we'll see you later.
Okay,
Thank
take care.
you.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thanks, Erin.
Bye-bye.
Gary.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.